Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:07 on this Thursday morning, the 19th day of February. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on O'Connor and Company. It's Larry O'Connor with Alex Swoyer from the Washington Times as our guest host this morning. Alex, thanks for being here all morning. How are you doing so far?
Of course. It's been so much fun.
Done.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Coming up at 7:35, James Rosen. He, of course, Washington correspondent for Newsmax, but he's been working on the second volume of his epic saga about Antonin Scalia. So we'll talk about that new release. Then at 8:05, Katie McFarland will give us her perspective on all the saber rattling over Iran. Now let's bring in Chris PABST. He's the author of Failure Factory, How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. Chris, great reporting there out of Baltimore at Fox 45. We actually covered this about an hour ago. We played a lot of your latest report. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is something that deserves, frankly, national attention because I find it as a bit of a canary in a coal mine or a perfect sort of example of what I believe to be broken with the current education system and the government funding of it. Why don't you give me some of the bullet points here about where Baltimore public schools are right now with regard to their graduation rate, their proficiency in math and English, and how that relates to the money that's being pumped into that system?
Sure. So I wrote Failure Factory because we've been doing this now for 9 years. We've been covering Baltimore City public schools and the amount of money going into the school system and what students and parents and taxpayers are getting for that. And the most recent data has just come out, and it's just simply more of the same. It's every single year for decades and generations, more money going in, but the kid outcomes, the student academic outcomes are not improving. So since 2017, when Project Baltimore launched and when the book begins, Baltimore City Schools has gotten a $500 million increase in funding from 2017 to 2025. That is a 38% increase in funding, and the graduation rate is up 1%. 1% with a 38% increase in funding. Math proficiencies from 2017 to 2025. Again, funding is up 38%. Math proficiencies are up 1%. And it's not just a Baltimore City issue. And really the reason I wrote the book is because what's happening in Baltimore City is happening throughout Maryland and happening throughout the country.
Yes.
In Maryland with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, I know you guys have talked about that, the massive increase in funding. That was passed in 2021. Since that was passed, Maryland has increased public education spending by about $3 billion. More than 10,000 additional employees have been hired to work in Maryland schools. Maryland enrollment is down. So we're seeing billions of additional dollars, far more employees working in public education with fewer students enrolled, and the graduation rate is lower. Jeez. The graduation rate throughout Maryland is lower now than it was in 2021.
So this is Alex here. I just have to jump in. Assuming that $3 billion didn't just go to all these new hires, right? Do you have any idea where else it was spent?
Well, the money, if you're gonna hire 10,200 additional people, a significant amount of that is going to that. But a lot of it, a majority of that money, is pay increases for the current employees. Oh. So teachers right now in Maryland, the teaching starting salary in the state of Maryland right now is $60,000. So if you're fresh out of college, you're 21 years old, you come to Maryland to teach, you're going to make $60,000 throughout the entire state. That's the minimum wage for a teacher. Yeah. But what that did was, let's say that you're a teacher and you were working in Frederick and you were making $50,000 in your fifth year. Well, you can't just have a new teacher come in making $60,000. You now have to bump up the pay for every other teacher in the state. Most of the money is going to salaries.
Yeah.
Plus, and that is really what Failure Factory is about. These laws are written in a way to favor the adults, not to favor the students.
Well, and let's not forget the benefits package that they get. I mean, you're just quoting the salary. It's a very, very pricey benefits package. And I think it should be noted, that you're right. These laws are written to benefit the adults who are working as teachers, educators, administrators, and that also happens to be the single most powerful political action committee, really, in the form of the teachers union that has influence over these lawmakers who write those laws.
Well, certainly the most powerful political influence in Maryland is the teachers union. I mean, I don't even think that's debatable. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we can really look at, and what my book really hammers home here, is if you look at Baltimore City schools right now, Baltimore City schools has a 71% graduation rate. But only 12% of the kids are proficient in math, like we talked about a couple of minutes ago. I mean, really let that sink in for a second.
Yeah.
71% of the kids are graduating. 12% of them are proficient in math. And why is that happening? Yeah. It's happening because the focus is not on educating kids. It's on acquiring funding.
Chris PAPST is our guest. His book is Failure Factory, How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. And Chris, I got to ask you, when you challenge the people who write these laws or who advocate for these policies that got us here, what's their response? So they say, just give it time, the system is working, or the real problem is a 38% increase isn't enough, it should have been 78%. I mean, how do they respond, or do they even respond?
Oh, they certainly respond. And the thing about my book that I think really separates it from other books on education is that it is an 8-year study from 2017 to 2025 of me doing this every day. And you can see what the school system said in 2017 when graduation rates were 70% and math proficiencies were 11, almost exact same as today. Every single year, there's a reason. There's an excuse for it. Now, if you look through what the Maryland State Department of Education said this year for why graduation rates are down, they blamed it on Donald Trump. And they said that it was because of federal immigration policy. That's the reason that they were down this year. Well, if you go back a couple years, then it was because of COVID. If you go back a couple years before that, it was because not enough schools had air conditioning. If you go back a couple years before that...
Wait. I mean, I see where you're going with this, but aren't there other school systems who have thrived while President Trump was president? Weren't there school systems that made it through COVID without this kind of failure? I mean, they're acting like those issues are isolated just to the Baltimore Metro.
Well, this is all why I wrote my book, because it doesn't. The only thing that changes in public education is the amount of money going into it. There's a 38% increase in funding alone going to Baltimore City over the past 8 years. The student outcomes do not change. They might go up a little bit, they might go down a little bit, they might stay stagnant. But if you look back over the decades, there's very little movement in student academic outcomes. But the teachers and the administrators are making enormous salaries, and there's many more of them. They keep hiring and hiring, but the student outcomes aren't being affected, largely because the money isn't going to the classroom. But every single year, when the new data comes out and we can see student academic outcomes are largely stagnant, the education establishment comes up with a reason. And they're like, and this year the reason was federal immigration policy.
That's insane. A couple things. You talked about the math proficiency. I just looked at reading. I think it's as of 2025, only 35% of 12th graders in the Baltimore schools were, I think in some assessments, were proficient in reading. That just screams to me a problem. These are people that are about to enter, the workforce or go into college. Beyond that, you mentioned immigration. There were some schools, I guess, that also had some students participate in these ICE protests, right, that we're seeing kind of all over the country, but they are happening in Baltimore too.
Yeah. Oh, they're certainly happening here. I put so my X account is just Chris PAPST, and I've been posting about this because there was a school in Baltimore County that had an ICE protest and kids walked out of the school. I pulled up the proficiencies for that school. Their math proficiency was less than 5%. So more than 95% of the kids in this particular high school, and I just can't remember the name right now, that were not proficient in math, and they're walking out of school missing instructional time. And to my knowledge, there were no consequences for that. Now, from my perspective, I'm a parent. I have 2 kids in public schools in Maryland. And if my kid is not proficient in math, I want my kid in class getting instructional time. I don't want them protesting. I mean, if they want to protest, do it on Saturday. Do it after school. But they walked out during school, during instructional time, when 95% of the kids in this school are not proficient in math. And that is really what we're seeing in a lot of public schools. The emphasis is not on education.
Chris PABST, you are a credit to your profession. This is exactly why our founders made sure that there was protection for the press in our First Amendment. Keep doing what you're doing. It may seem lonely out there sometimes, but that's actually a badge of honor. Keep following this story. It is hugely impactful, not just for the people and the children and the taxpayers of Baltimore, but for our nation. Well done, you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Chris PABST, his book, Failure Factory, How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. It's 7:17. The only official word from London police is that they arrested a man in his 60s. But the story is a little bit more involved than that. The man in his 60s, apparently, is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, up until just a couple of years ago, known as Prince Andrew. He was once second in line for the crown behind his brother, King Charles. Of course, he had that famous royal wedding with Fergie that ended in divorce. And, of course, notoriously, Prince Andrew spent an inordinate amount of time with the convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Well, now he has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. By the way, ironically, tragically, in this entire sordid tale, today is Prince Andrew's birthday. He is 66 years old. Happy birthday.
Do you think that was ironic, that today's the day they went in to arrest him? It's funny how that works out, right?
Assistant Chief Constable Oliver Wright noted that following a thorough assessment, we have now opened an investigation into an allegation of misconduct in public office. He, of course, has faced public scrutiny due to his ties to the late Jeffrey Epstein, including that young woman, Virginia Giuffre, who alleged he had sexual relations with her when she was only 17, and he knew her age. That's that famous picture of him smiling with the very young-looking girl. Ms. Giuffre, by the way, recently died in Australia under what many believe to be suspicious circumstances. The question is, how does this rise to the level of a criminal act in the United Kingdom? And one is very curious about the public office laws and the kind of conduct that would be deemed criminal versus just scandalous.
That's right. And I think from some of the reporting I'm reading out there, it looks like there's questions about some sort of trade documents, something also related to travel. It looked almost like they have security laws over there, I guess what we call classified here, where they're not supposed to share certain documents or intelligence about travel or trade. And it looks like maybe there's an allegation possibly that he shared something with Epstein at one point. So maybe that's the nexus. I'm not sure. There's not too much information out since this is just breaking, but I saw a couple articles mention something about that.
Of course, he was stripped of his royal titles last year when the latest round of allegations just wouldn't go away. And he's attempted to clean this up in the media, and it just hasn't worked. Every interview he gives ends up making it worse and worse for him and for the royal family, as you can imagine. It is interesting, that idea, Alex, that this has to do with confidential or top secret information that he may have had access to as a member of the royal family that has been passed along to Epstein.
It makes you wonder about their relationship,
right.
What was being traded back and forth.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder even more about so many of the allegations and suspicions about Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that he was protected with his behavior because much of what he was running was a espionage information operation, getting powerful people in compromised positions and then being able to utilize that leverage for information, whether for a government or for a corporation. In this case, it sounds like it could be for either, certainly for a private business or corporation, giving them insight into trade policies that only the royal family would have access to.
Yeah, and it's going to just, I guess, feed the fuel to this Epstein saga we've been following, I feel like, daily now. And it's going to probably pour some gasoline on the fire for some on the internet who are not satisfied with the documents the Justice Department has delivered. They're gonna want to demand more, and this will just open, I guess, another treasure trove to now we need documents released from the UK.
That's right. Well, and by the way, it doesn't do much for a lot of people in public positions, either working for the government or with high-profile media positions who are linked to the Trump administration, who have said, really not a whole lot to see here. Sure, there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of accusations, but nothing much to see. Well, it's risen to the level of an arrest in England now.
Yeah, well, and the other thing, though, is that going to be, Larry, the one element of justice for the victims? Because that's really, everybody talks about, like, what is going to surface from this? And I guess the end result's supposed to be justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. But really here we haven't seen it in our country. I
don't think anyone can tell me what that looks like exactly.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe today, one arrest over in the UK.
Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
7:37, it's O'Connor and Company here on this busy Thursday morning. Thank you for letting us be a part of your morning routine, but this show ain't routine. Couple of reasons. First, coming up at 8:05, we got KT McFarland, former Deputy National Security Advisor. If anyone knows whether a strike against Iran is imminent, KT McFarland knows. She'll tell us. You might want to hear that. Also, far from routine is our guest host this morning, a special appearance by Alex Swoyer. She's an attorney, Washington Times editor-at-large. Her book, Lawless Lawfare, Tipping the Scales of Justice to Get Trump and Destroy MAGA. You've also got a couple of podcasts, the Court Watch podcast, but then you also do long-form interviews, do you not, with notable personalities?
The Sit Down with Alex Swoyer is what it's called.
The Sit Down with Alex Swoyer.
Yes.
And I raise that because I happen to know for a fact that a future guest on the Sit Down
That's right.
with Alex Swoyer is none other than the chief Washington correspondent for Newsmax, James Rosen, who joins us now. We got you before Alex did, James, although she kind of got you today, too. My friend, congratulations on this new tome of yours.
Thank you both. Great to be with you both. And aren't I doing Court Watch?
You are. That is right. I'm going to have you talk all about your insights on the court. I'm very excited. Unfortunately, Larry beat me to it with this book interview, but it'll be a warm up for me. I'll have to follow up with some questions. Especially, I have the book sitting right in front of me, actually, too. See, Larry, it's got it right here.
It is a beautiful book, beautiful cover, and it's big. Listen, this is volume 2 of your magnum opus here on Antonin Scalia. So this is the Supreme Court years, 86 to 2001. James, give us an overview here. What kind of cases did the great justice chime in on there during those years?
Well, thanks. Great to be with both of you, both good friends. This new book that came out last week is called Scalia, Supreme Court Years, 1986 to 2001. As Larry mentioned, it is the second installment in a 3-volume biography of someone who was not just a very important Supreme Court justice, but also really one of the most important Americans of the last 100 years, because Antonin Scalia, not just through his rulings in cases, but really with his philosophy that he brought to the business of being a judge, and also his magnetic personality and his tireless evangelism off the bench, changed the way the law is written and drafted in this country, argued, and decided and interpreted. This new book covers the first half of his Supreme Court tenure. So it starts with his first day and what it's like to be a Supreme Court justice, what it's like to walk through those giant bronze doors. And in fact, in one of his private letters that's published in this book, Scalia said that when he attended his first conference, which is the closed-door meeting attended only by the justices in their great ornate conference room at the Supreme Court, where usually after all arguments have been 2 days earlier, they decide how they're going to rule on the various cases, and it's just them going around the room. And, of course, Scalia was the junior justice when he showed up. It's that person's job to attend to the door, pass notes, and also pour water for the other justices. When they came to him as the junior justice to say how he was going to vote in his first case, he said in a private letter, quote, that he felt like a Woody Allen character. And it takes you all the way through Bush v. Gore, which is probably the most famous case of his first half and the last case treated in this book. And, of course, that changed forever the way the American people view not only Antonin Scalia but the Supreme Court itself.
That's true. James, I have to ask you. So I was looking at this, and it talks about you looking at this through a biography sense, and how many lunches did you have? How many interviews did you have with Justice Scalia?
So I had no interviews per se, but I'm glad you brought this up, Alex, because this is a chapter in the book, and I have to say, since I'm biased, it's my favorite chapter because I'm a character in it. This chapter is called The Rabbit, and it's about the two lunches I had one-on-one with Antonin Scalia in 1999 and 2001 when I was 30 and 32, I think, if I can do that math. And I'm not a lawyer. And this book, I should point out, both of the books on Scalia that I've put out, and as will be the case with Volume 3 when it comes out, they're for non-lawyers. These books are for everyone, and they're for everyone to understand the extraordinary impact he has had, Scalia, on every facet of American life through the law and through his devout Catholicism. But in any case, the chapter, The Rabbit, is where I get together with lunch with Antonin Scalia at this modest, rundown Italian restaurant that was his favorite place, long gone now. It was called the AV Ristorante Italiano. They had plastic grapes on the wall. And when I got there, I'm 30 years old. He's busting out red wine. I'm not a lawyer. I'm in the presence of one of the most formidable genius intellects of the century. And I'm just trying to hold my own, really. And when it came time to order, he ordered the pulpi, which is octopus. And he had a certain sort of Jackie Gleason grandeur about him. And he said, "What is pulpi?" he said to the young Italian waiter. And the guy says, "Octopus." And he says, "Octopus, I'll have the pulpi." And he hands the menu back with a grand flourish. And then I knew I didn't want to eat anything with my hands. I didn't want to eat anything that's going to splatter sauce on either one of us. And I come from Staten Island, lots of Italian food there. So I knew just what to order. And I said, "I'll have the veal parmesan," easily manipulable with knife and fork. But Justice Scalia interrupts him. He says, "No, give him the rabbit." And the waiter and I look at Scalia, and we both said in unison, "Rabbit." And he said, "Yeah, you're going to like the rabbit. Give him the rabbit." And the waiter walks off with the menus. Now, I had never had rabbit in my life. I was grossed out by the thought of having rabbit. I haven't had rabbit since. Okay? And what's most striking about this is what you have is the country's foremost opponent of judicial activism is overruling my lunch order, which not even Mrs. Rosen does.
It's hard.
It's one chapter in this book, The Rabbit.
See, I love those stories because you learn so much more, like, I guess, of the personal side of a justice. And it's not easy. One, it's not easy to get an interview. That's like nearly impossible with a justice. But then to be able to sit down and have lunch, that's pretty incredible.
I don't know how
we had this really amusing correspondence that surrounded it all, too, Alex.
Well, hold that thought, James, if you can. Do you have a few more minutes? Because I want to hear more about the book and the rabbit and this obvious blatant infringement on the 10th Amendment rights of an individual to determine their own meal. We continue with James Rosen of Newsmax, his brand new book here, Volume 2 now, Scalia, Supreme Court Years 86 to 2001. It's out now, and as we take a quick moment to check with traffic, it's a great opportunity for you to go buy the book so you can have it. Buy it now. That's Scalia by James Rosen. 7:45. We continue with James Rosen, and I hope you had a chance to complete your order there on Amazon, Scalia, Supreme Court Years 1986 to 2001. James, since Antonin Scalia's death in 2016, has there been an assessment of his legacy? At the time, the media tended to villainize him because he represented not just a conservative approach to the Supreme Court and to judicial decisions, but I think they really didn't like him because he was such an intellectual about it. You could not argue with his arguments and with his logic. Has the hostility towards Scalia sort of abated a bit? And is there respect across the board now for what a wondrous mind this man had?
So it's interesting because when he was confirmed by the United States Senate to serve on the Supreme Court in 1986, Scalia won by a vote of 98 to nothing. And the fact that two senators were absent bothered him well into the 21st century. He could be heard on C-SPAN. He could be heard on C-SPAN as late as 2005 saying, "So let's just make it 100." But of course, on the court, and this new book, Scalia, Supreme Court Years, 1986 to 2001, capturing through interviews with other justices, through declassified documents that have never been published before, through his own letters, through interviews with his family members, his priests, his poker buddies, his hunting companions. You get a sense not only of his impact on the law, but of the man and of his relationships with other justices. And it's true that he certainly wouldn't have enjoyed anything like that unanimity were a vote taken on Justice Scalia on the day he died 10 years ago, February 13, 2016. But this book captures why he was so important in the law. And I think there is, to your question, Larry, a consensus today that we could use a man like Antonin Scalia today. And what made him so important, the reason he's one of the most important Americans of the last 100 years. If you want to understand modern America and how we got here, you have to understand Antonin Scalia's story and his philosophy, which was originalism. When he came along, there was a law, a trend in the law that was prevalent in our society called the living Constitution. Yeah. This is the idea favored by liberal judges and by Democratic presidents who appoint justices. That the Constitution is like a living, breathing organism. When we interpret it, it should be allowed its meaning to expand, almost like an accordion, to take account of newer phenomena that the Founding Fathers could never have anticipated, such as nuclear weapons or the Internet or what have you. Scalia stood athwart all that. He saw that as simply a vehicle for latter-day judges to graft onto the enduring text of the Constitution or any law enacted since then their own latter-day policy preferences. Scalia's idea for originalism was original meaning. In handling their central business, judges, what do they do for a living? They interpret the law, and they tell us what it means. They should be bound by the text, the original meaning of the law as found in its text, that it was widely understood to have in its own time. It shouldn't be twisted or stretched or what have you. And the Constitution isn't a living or a dead document. It's an enduring one. And that changed the way we draft the law, that we decide the law in this country. And by the time he died, even Justice Kagan, who was appointed by President Obama, said, in effect, as a result of Scalia's revolution in the law, quote, "We are all originalists now." He changed everything you see around you.
Alex Swoyer, he is playing your song here as the court watcher for the Washington Times. Jump in here.
I'm not quite sure if Justice Jackson got that originalism song note, but that's just that, and Justice Sotomayor to that effect. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is he was also really well known for his friendship with Justice Ginsburg, and there was that bipartisan nature, I guess you could say, between them. Him on the right wing of the bench, her on the left. I was always wondering, as I cover the court, like, are we going to see a friendship like that emerge in these days? And I'm just not convinced. At first, it seemed like there was some friendly banter and like back and forth with Justice Sotomayor and Justice Gorsuch when he joined the court, but that seemed to kind of unwind. It just seems like we're in a new era of the court where you don't necessarily have those, I guess, I don't know if I want to say institutionalists, but even James, you mentioned it with the confirmation votes. I mean, no one gets 98 anymore. You know, they're barely getting confirmed.
So in the first book, Scalia Rise to Greatness, 1936 to 1986, which charts his life up until the moment he sits down on the Supreme Court, you really see the birth and the flowering of the Scalia-Ginsburg relationship, because it began when they were both judges on the Court of Appeals, one rung below the Supreme Court. And I used Ruth Bader Ginsburg's papers at the Library of Congress so you can see in their own handwriting, in their own words, how Scalia and Ginsburg sort of begin this incredible friendship, felling over each other, kibitzing with each other, needling each other, going behind each other's backs to say, here's how we have to deal with Nino's challenge, that sort of thing. In the second book, the friendship that I draw out and that I think is most profound and really perhaps became his closest friendship, with a bond that was different from that he enjoyed with Ginsburg, is his relationship with Clarence Thomas. Ooh. When Clarence Thomas endures the extraordinary ordeal that he did in order to make it to the Supreme Court, he found the outstretched hand waiting for him of Antonin Scalia, and they became brothers for life. And I interviewed Justice Thomas in chambers for this book, and it's a very personal story that's told there as well. I don't think we'll see friendships like these emerge in the court as it's currently configured. But you see in the photo section of this book the photos of Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg dressed as 18th century opera actors, because they actually went on stage at the Kennedy Center. And then 3 weeks later, there they are, the two of them sitting atop an elephant in India together. And as I write in the book, polarization was already a problem that President Bill Clinton was complaining about in the 1990s. to see these photos surface 3 weeks apart and go viral in that time period was something the country had never seen before. They'd never seen such a friendship between two justices, and they had never seen such a fine example, a blessing of an example of a friendship that transcended gender, ideology, religion, jurisprudential philosophy. And that was a really healthy thing for the country. And to Alex's point, I hope we do see something like it again, but I'm not holding my breath.
I would argue there are very few Americans, human beings for that matter, who can wax poetic and write about the intricacies of the Watergate scandal, about the Beatles' White Album, and about Justice Antonin Scalia. But James Rosen is that guy, and this book is well worth your time. Scalia, Supreme Court Years, 1986-2001. It sure sounds like this is more than just a Supreme Court book or a book about a justice. This is about American history, the history we all just sort of lived through, but we had no idea what was really going on. James, congrats on this book. And real fast, that interview with Justice Thomas, is that on audio by any chance?
Yeah, I recorded it, and there's a transcript. We spent about 2.5 hours in chambers together, and there were times we were just crying, laughing, the two of us.
I might
need
to have you over for dinner and drinks, and then just have a listening session, because I am dying to hear that interview, James. Well done, sir. Congrats, my friend.
Thank you.
It is 7:56.